Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Sam.
And I'm Melissa.
I grew up in the FLDS community run by Warren Jeffs, and I moved out of that polygamous group when I was 18 years old.
Yes, and today we are excited to share something that is a little bit different. It's one of those things that I was thinking of the other day that I was like, you know what? This isn't a typical question because probably nobody even knows to ask this question, but it's something I always found really interesting, and so I wanted to share a little bit more about it.
Yep.
And let Sam answer my questions that I had when we first got together.
Believe it or not, she still has questions. Once in a while.
Yeah. One thing that some of you may know, some of you may not know if you're not familiar with the FLDS polygamous boys, but I grew up in a small town right outside of where Sam grew up. They were like 45 minutes apart. And so we would see the FLDS guys quite frequently in our town.
Yep.
And they always drove the nicest, most expensive, jacked up trucks that like we had ever seen.
Jacked up meaning they had a lift on them.
Oh yeah, jacked up meaning they had like crazy lift kits.
Yep.
And they always had really dark tint, and we always thought,
Yep.
we're like, oh my gosh, it's because they're trying to keep like secrets and stuff. So I wanted to
out.
ask Sam
That's
some
what we
questions.
wanted everyone to think.
Yeah, so I thought I'd ask him some questions so he could share with you guys why polygamous guys always have such really, really nice trucks, or at least the FLDS ones.
It is a great question, and I'm not surprised you have that question. There were probably a lot of people that lived around where we grew up that wondered why. Why do they always have such nice vehicles and trucks and all that? So
yeah.
So
why, babe?
Let's get into it. Okay, great. So, well, there's a lot of reasons, but number one, I would say, is a lot of them needed trucks for their jobs. They didn't need the nicest trucks in the world, but they needed trucks. So let's just start there. They needed trucks because of the type of work they would do, often in construction.
Question though, when you add like, a 20-inch lift.
Yep.
I'm exaggerating a little bit, but
Sometimes.
When you add a super huge lift, does that make it harder to like put stuff into your trunk? Like,
yes, but it's worth it.
Seems counterproductive.
It's worth the pain to get the truck, the nicest, lifted, most beautiful, decked out truck. So that was just a thing out there. Everyone was almost in competition to have the best looking, the nicest truck, and they would go. My brothers, I moved out when I was 18, so I didn't really have a chance to get my own truck and do all the things I would have done. Who knows to the truck that I would have gotten, but a lot of my brothers would put, like you say, they would do the lifts, the fancy big wheels and the tires and the custom tailgates and the custom grill in the front and the custom liner in the back of the bed. Really dark tint, like you say, custom stereo systems in the inside. When I was growing up out there, they didn't have the big touch screen TVs yet, so we would always put in a fancy, not always,
system?
but a lot of times put in a fancy stereo system and
to blast our
church music? Church music, of course. Never the radio.
Never Taylor Swift or Hillary Duff if you're Sam, but
well, those we couldn't resist. No, I'm just kidding. So anyway, we did definitely we listened to music that we weren't supposed to in our trucks, but we weren't supposed to. But anyway, so we'd always do all this, put all this money, custom exhaust pipes and things to make it sound nice, and it was supposed to save on gas mileage, but I'm still not convinced that it made any difference. We would suit them up so they'd have more power and more get up and go and that. So anyway, it was definitely a lot, thousands and thousands of dollars put into these trucks. After buying a truck that was already
super expensive,
$80,000 truck, depending on which one they got. So,
do you feel like they did it? Like there weren't many things, like material type of things that you guys were allowed to have, right? Like you didn't have computers and like your phones weren't supposed to have internet. Do you feel like it was just like the one thing that material-wise you guys could have?
Yes, it was a big part of it. And kind of someone else asked a question recently on our channel, why do they all wear watches? And once again, kind of going hand in hand here, you're right. Not only it was very rare for us or them to go on vacations, big family vacations. They didn't celebrate many holidays, so they weren't spending money on that. So it was kind of I think it was a kind of a way of feeling like they had something that could be their own and they could make it how they wanted to make it because so much was dedicated to how the church wants it.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things where, okay, I can get a truck, the truck I want, and I can do to the truck what I want to do to the truck, and kind of feel like they had that control over it.
Yeah.
But it was definitely something like the dark tint you mentioned. That's something that, it's hard to say. I know that a lot of people did it because if they were sneaking out with a girl or something, they didn't want people around the community to see who was in their truck.
Ah.
So that was one reason.
So to stay secretive within their own community, not from the outsiders.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. No, that's true. It is true. And in the summer times, it was nice to have darker tints just to kind of keep the heat out of the truck. And I think it just kind of became a cool thing to do. Like everyone tried to have the darkest tint. And I remember sometimes people would put the tint so dark on their back windows that at nighttime they'd have a hard time backing up before the day of backup cameras. Because they couldn't see out the back window. So anyway, it was, and a lot of times they got pulled over for the tint being too dark.
In Utah, you couldn't have tint that dark.
Yep.
But I noticed that where they're from is like right on the border of Utah and Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed to be that the guys that had the really, really dark tint would always get their trucks registered in Arizona, where it was legal to have tint darker.
A little bit darker, yeah.
And then they'd be driving in Utah, but like the Utah cops could only do so much if they were registered. Is that true?
Right.
Or is that just like something we...
No, it's true, but they would have to have somewhere in Arizona to register it too, right? So they couldn't just...
Oh, gotcha.
If they lived in Utah, which I lived on the Utah side, so all of my brothers had their trucks registered in Utah and would get pulled over if the tint was too dark. But they would pay the fine and keep their tint.
Okay, so how competitive was it between like brothers? Like, was it like if this brother got this kind of tint, then the other one would try to like one up them, or if they did this to their truck? Like, was it competitive between everyone?
There was always a little bit of competition with having nice things, whether it was the trucks or the watches or the leather jackets or whatever the case may be. There is definitely a little bit of competition, but yeah, amongst the trucks, it seems like everyone would try to get the tallest lift on the truck or the nicest grill or the nicest tail lights and all that. So definitely some kind of competition going on. But because they all lived in construction, it seemed, and didn't spend their money on vacations and holidays and things like that, and the boys weren't allowed to date, so they weren't spending money on dating and that type of thing. They had all this money. Even after giving a large sum of it to the church, they did have money left over where they could spend on all these nice trucks and do things like that would cost extra money.
And I know some people are going to ask, but so you guys got to own your own trucks. The church wouldn't try to own it, because I know I had heard before that like later on when Warren Jeffs was put in prison, like they would have to like sign their cars over, and I know that it got a little bit more where the church was possessive. But when you were out there,
no, when I was out there, yes, you would buy your own vehicle. It'd be under your name. All of my older brothers had bank accounts, and so they had their own separate financials.
Yeah.
Whether they could do as they pleased. I know that as Warren, certain amounts of money was required to turn into the church. But as far as the other money that was left over, they could do with it as they pleased. And I do know that as Warren Jeffs was thrown into prison, and even before he was put into prison, things started getting a lot more strict. And okay, everything belongs to the church, and I need control over everything. It seemed like towards the end there.
Yeah. But when he was out there, just because I had a feeling, I'm like, that's going to be asked about. But
no. While I was out there, it was a lot easier to get away with owning things that you wanted to own and that. So. And
what was the first truck you ever drove?
Oh boy. So legally?
Let's do legally.
Because technically, I drove a lot out there before I moved out. But I didn't. I actually got my driver's license after moving away. At 18 years old, I moved away. I had my permit. I had started the process, and I had gone with my mother to the closest DMV and got my driving permit. So that I had, but I had not had my driver's license
until after you left.
Until after I left. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So what was the first truck? What truck would you normally drive around? Or
a lot of different trucks. I drove almost all of my brother's trucks growing up around the community. I didn't really drive outside of the community that much, only on rare occasion. So. But the first truck I ever drove, I would have been, 11 years old. And my brother and I were just kind of playing around. The brother just younger than me, and we were playing in our backyard. And one of my older brothers had a big white Chevy truck, and it was huge, big wheels, really lifted, just a ginormous truck. And it was parked right in front of a big stack of pallets. Does everyone know what a pallet is?
Yeah.
Like a wooden pallet.
Yeah.
So anyway, and so we were just playing around. We said, oh, hey, there's a truck right here. And, oh, hey, the keys are in it. So we jumped in, and I jumped in the driver's seat. And, of course, it's a stick shift. And I could barely, I was just trying to figure out how to work it and the clutch and all that. So we started it and tried to push the clutch and everything. And I just crashed right into the pallets. There was no stopping the truck. I had no idea what was going on.
How angry was your brother?
Well, it was a big monster truck. It didn't even touch it.
Oh, okay.
The pallet
just rolls right over the
pallet
pallets.
stack just knocked over, and then it stopped, caught on one of the pallets or something. So anyway, so that was the first experience I had. But, I had a lot of experiences just driving, delivering. I worked at a farm store out there, so delivering bales of hay or whatever it was that we were doing, I would drive around here and there. So.
Typical small town stuff when you drive too young and driving around town.
So, but yeah, there were every type of truck they would have. It wasn't just Chevy or just Ford or just the Ram trucks or anything. It was they had every variety you can think of out there. I will say though, in my family, we were not allowed to have a truck the color red. That was a no-no. So no red trucks. There were a couple trucks out there that were red though. It was very few and far between, and I don't know if they got an amazing deal on them or something, and that's why they ended up with it. But I did see a couple red trucks. But in my family, it wasn't allowed.
Just showing weird signs of rebellion, right? You're like, well, I'm gonna rebel just a little bit. I'm gonna get a red truck.
Boom.
Oh, that's awesome.
So,
well, if you want to hear more about what it was like for Sam growing up in polygamy, then please like and subscribe. And also on our Instagram at growingupinpolygamy, we are going to be finding out if anybody can guess what Sam's dream truck is. Because right now he does not currently have a truck.
No.
Poor guy. But
I had one for a time, and I'm not going to say what kind that was to give anything away. But I did have one, and then I sold it. So
go on to our Instagram. Let us know what you think Sam's dream truck is, and we will let you all know tomorrow.
Good luck guessing.
We'll talk to y'all soon.
Talk to you soon.